Welcome to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast with Darren Mitchell. If you're a sales leader looking to take your leadership to a whole new level, then this is the podcast for you. We'll be exploring tips, techniques, and strategies to help you take your leadership to the exceptional level and allow you to enjoy more money, more meaning, and better sales results. All right, welcome back to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast, and welcome to a guest. I must say the last probably 6 months of podcasts, I've been talking to people in a different time zone and a different hemisphere. Very pleased to welcome to the podcast Georgia Stormont, all the way from Essendon in Victoria, which is literally about 30 minutes drive from my house.
Thank you,
Georgia, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Darren. Pleased, excited to be here. Thank you.
So we've just spent a bit of time before you press recorded, just good English, press recorded. Just speaking about our various backgrounds and the fact that we share some commonality in that your partner's a mad Melbourne supporter, your son's a Melbourne supporter, my family, apart from my wife, is a Melbourne supporter, and we also play in the local footy league in terms of competition, which is good. So we've got a lot in common.
Yeah, a small world too, right? Does your wife barrack for anybody, or
she actually grew up as a North Melbourne supporter?
Okay.
And they say that you tend to, well, this is what she says, you tend to marry somebody who reminds you of your father, right? And her father is, and still is in his 80s at the moment, loves sport, was a football umpire, was a footballer, cricketer, cricket umpire, just a sport nut. So she was always at the sport every weekend. So when I came along and I was also a sports nut, she decided when we had kids, she's not going to sports. But I get to watch every night because the Big Bash is on. For those in Australia, the Big Bash cricket is on, and I get to watch that each night. So
so you're into cricket too. We didn't cover that in our pre-chat.
No, we didn't. In fact, my father-in-law is a life member of the VCA, Victorian Cricket Association, and gets the benefit of Boxing Day tickets every year.
Right. So did you go?
Yeah, I get first dibs because he went this year for the first time, or this past Christmas for the first time since 2000. And I knew that was 2000 because that was when our first daughter was born, and she was 3 months old. And we had some friends come out from England, and we went to see Australia in the West Indies.
No, it was Australia,
West Indies.
Yeah.
2000. And since then, he hasn't. Well, we've always been away at Christmas time anyway, but he tended to give the tickets away. But this year, he said, "No, I'm gonna go for the first time in 24 years," and he loved it. He actually said at the end of the day, had a bit of trouble watching the ball because you were side on, so maybe his glasses weren't as good, but I was there the first 3 days of the Boxing Day tests the whole time.
Daniel and I usually go day 2 and we'll dine somewhere, which has been really nice without kids. And we just couldn't get tickets with the ballots and stuff, and we're like, that's okay. And I think Boxing Day was 38 degrees, right? But we were excited because we'd been following the cricket up until while everyone's still working, right? And then then this one, everyone's off. So Sammy Conster's coming in, and so my son as well plays cricket in the summer, Darren. So we're getting heavily involved in the cricket side of things now too. And it was just so exciting watching someone young come through. I wrote an article actually about it on LinkedIn about like Sam coming in and playing the way that he did, and how it would have been really challenging, I think, I talked about it as succession planning, and you've got to, the Australian team is aging. I think they're all like average 32, 33 years old. We need new players coming in. I don't think how they did the McSweeney handling, I didn't think they handled that very well. Bringing him in, smash him through, go, no, you're not good enough, and then out again. I mean, I know he'll probably come back in, and Daniel, my partner's like, he's probably better at a 4 or 5 at that.
Yeah, he's not an opener.
He's not an opener, right?
That's it.
So I'm glad that we trusted Sam to be himself. I think there's so much courage going, ramping in like that second or third over, being like, holy shit.
Well, the interesting thing with that is that's out of his character. That's not how he normally plays. And I think what will happen it'll come out at some stage. I'm not sure when, but it'll come out that the role that he played was not his natural style, but it was almost like a hiding to nothing. We need to change it up. Bumrah, for example, from India, has just got this spell over a lot of the Australians, and
Yeah.
it's almost like I've got to
A
be
lot of the
really
world.
watchful. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And just come in and mix it up a bit and get
Yeah.
amongst it. And I think he played that really well. But
Brilliant.
you'll see over time he'll play a different style.
Yeah, I'd love to listen to a podcast or an interview with him about his mindset going into that because there's bits of snippets are coming through going, he's going to take it to Bumrah. I'm going to come out and Bumrah had shifted the field. Like he
Yeah,
put someone behind
yeah,
the wicket keeper to take that ramp shot. Like that
yeah.
that opens up, so much else of the field. So I mean we could probably talk about sport for the whole podcast. But I really don't mind my cricket. So then the test matches, sometimes I can go in and out. It can be a bit boring, particularly when it's becoming draws and things like that. I can lose interest. But
Yeah.
this one, particularly being such a high Indian population in Australia, the result being 1-1 and the Boxing Day and then going into Sydney for the win
Yeah.
was really exciting.
It was phenomenal. And I always say that I've got a few colleagues who are based in India, and I like to say that outside of India, there's probably more people of Indian descent in Australia, and
Yeah,
particularly in Melbourne. So when you go to watch like a cricket, and the same thing applies to Sri Lanka, and Pakistan, there are literally more Pakistan, Indian, Sri Lankan supporters at the MCG than there probably are Australian. So the noise and the atmosphere is just
oh,
absolutely
it was
phenomenal.
electric. Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
and I remember when Travis Head, and we're going to get onto sales in a second, but
Yeah.
indulge us. So for those of you listening, just indulge us for a couple of more minutes. Um, I remember when Travis Head got bowled by Boomer on the first day, or maybe the second day,
In Melbourne
in
and
Melbourne.
had no runs.
Had no runs,
Yeah.
but the crowd noise was insane. My Apple Watch was going. The loud environment is it's just banging. Because a few years earlier, 20, what was it, 2024, 2023, Melbourne Carlton semi-final when Carlton won in the last 30 seconds. The noise at the MCG, and there was probably about 85,000 people there. It was the loudest I've ever heard it. It was, and as a Melbourne supporter, I was ropeable, but I was laughing because of the
Yeah.
noise. And it was like that at the MCG. It is
Yeah.
just phenomenal. So if anybody is listening who've never been to a cricket match or a full-on, full capacity football match at the MCG, do yourself a favour because it is just a phenomenal
It
experience.
is. Well, and we ended up going in. We woke up on the fifth day and thought, oh, well, we'll go in. And
Mm,
the kids' tickets, because it was the fifth day, kids' tickets were free. And my guest, Danny's an MCC, but my guest, I think, was $10. So it cost us
yeah,
$10 to get the whole family in. We got the
yeah,
train in. And we went in for the second session. So 3 wickets had already dropped. And we were kind of like, oh, geez, it'd be good if we get 7 more. Can we get 7 more? We're probably India are going for a draw. They're not going to be able to get there. And we saw all 7 wickets.
yeah,
Like it's just probably one of
yeah,
the greatest days. So
yeah.
really exciting. Yeah.
Sensational. Absolutely awesome.
And there's so many parallels that we can make from cricket and succession and sales.
Well,
That's
it's
what I
just
know we've made.
well, it's and you look at it, it's like there are some players that are super consistent. There are other players that are great one day, not great the next, and it's very similar to sales in terms of, you want to make every post a winner, but the reality is not every customer is going to be a good suit, a
Yeah.
good match for your service. So I want to talk a bit about sales and obviously sales coaching and leadership and stuff like that. But I always like to ask the guests a bit of background in terms of where you've come from and specifically what led you to be a coach and specifically a sales coach, specifically in the agricultural industry.
Yes, agricultural space. So my background is agriculture in terms of my professional career. I kind of fell into it. As I was saying to you earlier, I had no idea what I wanted to do when I finished year 12. I put down engineering
Yeah,
in terms of, when you go through your top preferences and the careers advisor's like, oh, you're good at maths, do engineering. I'm like, okay. So I put down engineering at all these different unis and you needed to get a raw 40 in methods to get into engineering pretty much anywhere. And when I got my results back, I got a raw 39.
oh no.
So, which look, that was still a really damn good score in methods, right? But I was like that. I was really disappointed. Like, you know, thank goodness, because I think like I'm not an engineer. That would have bored me to tears. So that worked out. The universe was working in my favor there. And as you know, as I believe it always is. But so then I was like, you had a week to go through that bloody book and go, okay, what other course can I do? And I was working part-time, I think, with as a receptionist, and I was flicked through the book and I found a natural resource management course, which was a broader agricultural degree that kind of I worked with agricultural students, horticulture, animal science. So it kind of allowed me to branch and have a look at all of that. And then after I graduated, I started working full time at my gym where I worked part time because I just couldn't get a job, Darren. So I was trying to get a job, going through a lot of natural resource management or catchment management authorities and something I probably didn't want to do anyway. Dabbled a little bit in horticulture, working for a company called One Harvest and ripening mangoes, and then came back and did a season on a strawberry farm. And then I started pretty much my full-time career at Murray Goulburn, where I was a field officer and so helped dairy farmers with things like milk quality, milk assurance, and food safety and those kind of things.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and I loved it. I moved up to Cobram, so I moved away from mum and dad I think I was 20, 19, 20 when
Okay.
I did that. And loved it. Just really loved it. Moved all over Victoria. I did heaps of driving. I saw heaps of farms and knew that agriculture was where I wanted to stay. Ended up coming back to Melbourne for love. My partner didn't want to move to the country. He's 6 years older than me, so established in his career and his footy and played in the AMOs, so wanted to hang around where we were. And I really like being close to my family as well. So came back and thought, oh, how do I work on farm and live in the burbs? And I fell into, again, a job at a vegetable seed company where we sold an Australian vegetable seed company that sold veggie seed to us Australian farmers. We then branched out into New Zealand during my stint there. And so I got to travel all over Australia and all over the world selling vegetable seed. I didn't sell vegetable seed over the world, but I sourced it to bring into the country. So really cool job. I had no kids when I started there, and I left there coming up 2 years ago, and I had three kids. So it was a really great company, family-owned business. So I'm not sure, you said you'd done some work with elders and things. Muir and Sons. E.E. Muir and Sons. They're a big farming organisation, so a family business. They're into their fourth generation now, which is pretty cool. So it was just a really beautiful small company, really nimble. We were able to move quickly, make decisions, and I really loved that. Obviously, the longer I got there, the more red tape, of course, as the company grows. That's the hamstring that happens as you continue to succeed. And we brought on some really great people, and I just hit my ceiling. It was small. I didn't want to be the GM and I didn't want to be the national sales manager. So I was like, okay, I'm going to move off. Prior to that, I'd done a Masters of Life Coaching. I did that, as I said, we spoke about being based in Melbourne. We had some of the strictest, if not the strictest, lockdown rules globally. I was inside the Ring of Steel, Darren. If you're in Gisborne, were you outside that Ring of Steel? So you had
I was,
little bit. You had it a little bit
but
more
get this,
freedom, but
Georgia.
not much.
I've got a second screen here, which is a nice 27-inch curved Samsung screen, right? Which I bought click and collect from Good Guys in Sunbury. So I ordered it online. It was contactless delivery. So I got there in the car park, driving back up the highway. There's a diversion just on the other side of Sunbury, which was the end of the Ring of Steel, and I had to go through the checkpoint where the army was, and there was the copper. And so he said, "Where's your papers?" And I said, "What papers?" He said, "Your papers to actually travel through the checkpoint." I said, "I don't have one. I just bought this for work because I need it for work." And he said, "Oh, you know what? I could charge you, and I could issue a fine of was it $1,652 or something?" I said,
What? Yeah,
"Well, you could, but you probably wouldn't want to because I'm actually working." All right, so he let me off.
yeah.
So it wasn't a great experience. So hold that thought because yesterday I had a conversation with a couple of guys in the States who run an ad agency using geofencing. All right. So they
Okay.
actually use satellites and uh, they create like a virtual fence around an area, and they have a lot of business in Australia. And they said to me, guess who was using this? Who was the biggest user of this in Australia around COVID? And I said, the government. And they said, absolutely. So the Ring of Steel was actually used not just physically, but there was geofencing. They were
Mm,
tracking us.
mm.
Anyway,
It was a tough time, and I don't, excuse me, I don't like to go into it too much detail because it was a really challenging time. My personality, excuse me, I'm an extrovert, so I get energy from when I meet people, and my
yeah,
partners as well. So it was a really draining time for us. We've got three
yeah,
kids. We had a smaller house back then. We've since moved, and so when we have to both work from home, with we I just gone finished maternity leave as well when we went into lockdown.
yeah.
We just didn't have enough doors in our house to like close off and have meetings and that kind of stuff. So what did I do? I decided to undergo a master's because I love learning. And so that was an outlet for me. Some people are like, God, three kids, lockdown, like that seems crazy. But it was what I needed. So I just did that self-paced um, course, which had once we'd all opened, we were able to get back onto the in classroom
Yeah.
training as well. And so then now when I left Fairbanks, I pivoted back into agriculture. I'd done a lot of coaching outside of ag, but I pivoted back and decided to utilize that Masters of Life coaching where I've understood people and behaviors, communication strategies, and all those kind of things, along with my agricultural sales experience. That's where my
Mm.
professional sales has come from. But I've been selling for money, I suppose, since I was about 15 and I first worked at Bilo. So
The
I've been selling.
Philo.
Yeah, now that's been bought out by Coles for any young ones there that don't remember Bilo. That was our local supermarket that I worked at. I think it was 14 and 9 months when you're
Yeah,
able to kind of first start working. So yeah, I've been kind of connecting with the public like that for a long, long time. And there's lots of things that I've learned in that time. So that's kind of how I've pivoted back in and now run coaching and sales trainings for ag companies and share all of my learnings and what
yeah,
didn't work,
yeah.
what we fumbled along the way. And I've done things wrong a lot of times. So I hope and kind of share those stories too.
No, that's awesome. I was as you were talking, we talked about this before, some of the challenges that people have in sales and the
Mm.
perception that people have around sales. Now, I think you mentioned that I think the comment was, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think you said, "Oh, we're selling from the moment we come out of the womb,"
Yeah.
literally, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And so I'd love your perspective on this because as I mentioned to you earlier, ag is quite a unique, it's a big industry, but it's actually quite unique and quite niched. Um, every single person is a salesperson, even though many people don't necessarily have a sales target to achieve or a quota to
Yeah.
get, and etc.
I
stuff.
like that, how you've said that. Yeah.
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 Um, what have you noticed about, I guess, the ag industry based on your experience and working in other industries as well, that is so unique about them and that is really good around the selling component?
What I've noticed, and I think what drew me to agriculture in terms of the demographic, it's a very male-dominated demographic still. It is shifting slowly. There are a lot more women coming into the space, but in terms of the position, so like who I'm connecting with, and the higher positions on farm still tend to be very male dominated. And there's also a tendency of a really direct, we talk about there's no bullshit, there's no real
Yeah.
gray area. It's very black and white in agriculture because
Yeah.
it has to be. Either we have enough water or we don't have enough
Mm.
water. Either where yields are high enough or they're not high enough. We're either making money or we're not making money. So I think because of that black and whiteness of the industry, selling comes with it. There's some nuances, I think, that we need to have that you may not need to have when you're going to pick up, say, your Samsung TV or your
Yeah.
fridge, for example. So that's kind of, yes, I believe that sales in itself is a process that across any industry we can incorporate. I think what comes out of it through my experience is much more empathy and compassion. I think other industries can take that from us as well. You have to have empathy and compassion when you're selling in agriculture, or you won't last. If we've had floods. When I was at Fairbanks, we had floods down in Tasmania where, farmers just had livestock wash out into the ocean, and they'd lose their entire plantings, and you'd have just all of their soil gone, and that just everything is gone. And we went through a lot of that through the dairy industry as well, through that really long drought period. And sitting with people in that shit, I think that's the empathy and compassion moment. It's not trying to fix it. It's not trying to fill the space. It's just sitting with them and listening to them and how hard it was.
Yeah.
That's a big part of, I think, building that trust and rapport when you're selling. It's building that connection and knowing that you give a shit because you do, and you want to be able to help them come back from that, from those tough times. Yeah. I think that's a big part of ag and sales.
Yeah, it's as you're saying that, I'm thinking a lot of different industries, they talk a good game. They talk about things like, you know what, we love our customers. We treat our customers like gold. But often it's transactional, often it's conditional. They'll treat them as gold insofar as what they can do for them in terms of, buying their products, buying their services. But I always say that sales is the ultimate form of service. So you serve first, and then you might get the opportunity to reap the benefits of that service, but you don't do it for the transaction. You do it because it's a good thing to do. So the comment around compassion and understanding, it really rings true, particularly when you consider that people like to do business, and this would be specifically relevant to the industry that you specialize in. They want to do business with people who they know, who they like or have likability, and who they can trust, who they know are going to be there irrespective of what's going on. Would that be a fair comment?
Absolutely. And we knew that. That was something that I definitely learned through the Fairbanks days, and I probably actually initially learned that through the Murray Goulburn days. I was fortunate. I started at Murray Goulburn in 2012. So the drought had broken, and not wanting to get too graphic or too morbid, but there was a really high increase in suicides in dairy farmers around that time, back in the kind of 05 to 2010.
Yeah.
When it was really hard, people just had no money. If there's no water, there's no milk. Milk is 80% water, if you weren't aware. And so I didn't start in that moment. I started once the drought had broken. And so there was a lot of kind of learning of that, of, what do we bring to the table and how can we better our field service team to be equipped with that. And so there was a lot of, in that, there were grower connections and farm get-togethers where it was just checking in on people's mental health and checking how people were, and having cups of coffee and, dotting them a lot around the country to just get people out and connecting, because I think, as the science shows, it's human connection that builds resilience and helps people get through.
100%.
And it's that often that isolation when people feel like they can't go on, it's then they go down that other path. So I think, I'm okay with sales being transactional. I think that's as long as it's transparent, right? I understand that we're here for a purpose, and you guys are here for a purpose too. I think the way that we improve that is then by building trust, rapport, connection, having empathy and compassion. And I want to bring up too, because I think it molds with this topic really well. I have clients or businesses come to me saying, I've got a proportion of my team that just aren't confident. They just lack confidence in sales. They're not from a sales background, and I really need help to kind of to get them on over the that hurdle. And then whenever I share that, I think it's just a really shift of mindset. That's what I love about the life coaching degree, is it's just simply shifting that perspective, going, okay, you think at the moment that you're not good, or that you don't want to do sales, or you're not great at it, you've had some bad experiences. You and I were joking kind of about that sleazy used car salesman kind of, that mindset that comes up for people, right?
Yeah.
But I think when we're selling, right, and so I like to use my as an example, and I do this in my training. So I say I'm a sales coach for the agricultural space, right? And so what I do is I help sales teams build and boost confidence, and ultimately close more deals so that you're going to increase your margins, increase your budget, ultimately boost your sales trajectory for whatever that might be, 1, 2, 5 years. And I can then go into how I do that, but that's basically what I do. So being able to articulate what it is that I do. You have to have a problem. So the team has to have a problem. They're either lacking confidence in sales, they're struggling to handle those objections, they're missing the buying, selling cues, they're not able to build rapport or trust. There's lots of different chinks in that chain that might be not fully connected yet. And so listening and understanding what those problems are, then and only then, once I understand the problem, would I pitch and sell, right? And then it's a privilege. And this is what I love sharing with my audience. As you said, sales is a service, right?
Yeah.
I'll only pitch when I know I can solve the problem.
Yeah.
And then it's a privilege, right?
Absolutely.
It's a privilege for me to be able to say, hey, you don't need to choose me, but I know that I can help you solve the problem. And that's great. That transaction can begin, right? But don't start, like those people that come into our LinkedIn inboxes, right? That kind of pitch straight off the mark. They haven't even said hello. It's kind of like, that's got a really icky feeling, doesn't it? Because I don't even know you. I'm not going to jump into bed with you. Like we haven't even, right? And so that when you shift it to saying, hey, it's a privilege, once we listen properly, I think that's a really big challenge. I think a lot of people, a lot of industries, a lot of generations my age and above. I don't know that my children are any better though, so I'm not sure where that tends to improve. But I think it's the listening is a big part of the challenge.
Oh, it's huge. And I've been in sales for 20 plus years, and I do a lot of conferences, I do a lot of training, I do a lot of coaching. And if there was one skill set that across the board, salespeople, senior executives, sales leaders, sales directors can improve, it's listening, right? Because the vast majority, and this is a gross generalization, but the vast majority of people listen to respond because they want to share something. They don't listen to understand. And so the ability to just shut up and create silence and let the person share what it is they want to share with no interruptions, no thought process in terms of I've got to share this bit of information is a clear differentiator. And if you do that, it's amazing how you make that other person feel and what that now creates for you in terms of space to potentially pitch if that's the right thing to do. But listening is not easy.
It's not easy because our brain never turns off, right? And so that's when, I love talking about shutting the fuck up and creating that space in our mind, because I'll do it myself. People will be talking and I'll be writing shopping lists in my brain, or thinking about I've got to go and get Noah at cricket, and really that's a practice. It's creating that space for the other person, because I know that when I do that better, I close better. My stats show me that.
Oh, absolutely.
And so when we can continue to kind of see that, and that's the evidence, right, isn't it? That, okay, because everyone goes, oh, active listening. Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I'll do that. No one can does it though, right? Like, excuse
No,
my
they don't.
swearing. I apologize. It's my ag background
They
coming out.
don't.
I think you and I could do a whole podcast on listening, right? And the skills that come from that. I'm just trying to think, because obviously I can run trainings, you could run trainings on that, but it's more than that, isn't it? It's about, as a parent, I've got a 10, an 8, and a 5-year-old, and it's how can I instill that even more so in my kids as well, to listen actively, not to respond, as you said, to understand or to give someone space.
Yeah.
To listen to that farmer that's had that challenge, or to your friend that's just fallen over and scraped their knee.
Correct. And
Right?
and we talk about never being off, we're always on. And I say this to leaders all the time, that you're always on. And there's no better example than that than your own family, because people are watching, right? So people won't do what they're told, they'll do what they see. And particularly for children, they're going to watch you and your husband act, interact, listen. And if you can demonstrate the good principles that you talk about, then you don't actually have to tell them. They will see that and they'll replicate that behavior. And so when you're in a corporate environment, I say this to sales leaders all the time, you've got to be really conscious. You've got to remember that you're in the Truman Show, that movie that Jim Carrey was in. And imagine you've got this camera following you every single moment of every single day, watching your every move. Would you be happy, first of all, for you to watch the replay of that? And would you be happy to share that with somebody else who's near and dear to you in terms of them seeing what you do on a daily basis? And when people think about that, they say, I'm not sure, I'm not sure I would, because I'm not necessarily always demonstrating the things that I want to see play out in my team. So being conscious of that and understanding that, particularly from a sales leadership point of view, your team are watching your every move, but the greatest gift you can give them is the gift of your attention. So be
Mm.
with them. So when you're with them, whether it be on a one-on-one or on a sales meeting, be with them, which means you don't necessarily have to have an agenda. You have to demonstrate that active listening because it's about how you make them feel, not about what you say.
Mhm.
So really important.
Absolutely. And I think there's nothing more. I love that analogy. And I think even more so to that though, people not wanting to watch that back because it's confronting, right? And
Yeah,
what comes up for me initially in that is those moments that I have all the time as a parent when I make a mistake and I do something and I'm like, I've yelled at my kids, I've got crossed a line, I've done something that I don't want them to do, or I've seen them do something that I do. Aren't kids just they're the monkey see, monkey do, and you're like, oh, that's so me, and I don't want to do that. And so it's beautiful in a space where it's like, okay, I want to shift. It's kind of like that pendulum, isn't it?
yeah,
And getting it back into the middle of my values is where I want to stay. And when it swings out, of course, that's life. And being okay with that and having those discussions, I think, both with your family, but also with your team to say, hey, I definitely wasn't the best version of myself. I do that with my family, with my kids. I'm not great at it, I'm getting better, but saying, hey, I wasn't the best version of myself in that moment. Sometimes it takes me a while to cool down to come back to that.
yeah,
Um, and this is why I'm going to apologize for this. And I'd like to be able to hear you out better next time, whatever it might be. And I think as a leader in a company, and we talk a lot about that in terms of your culture and your sales culture, or just your culture in general,
mm,
talk about it, right?
yeah,
Like, don't have those shitty canvases on the wall that no one does any, that everyone walks by and that, like that they can collect dust. It's a living breathe. Culture is a living, breathing thing.
it
And
is.
we'll make mistakes and we'll go, you know what? I called you out one-on-one in that meeting and I had a bit of a crack at you and I feel really bad about it. I don't know how it made you feel. I don't want to do that in that meeting. And I want to apologize to you. And then they can get some feedback to say, you know what? I actually didn't mind being called out like that if I've made an error.
Yeah,
I remember pulling my boss up a couple of times. I never got pulled out, reamed kind of publicly at my work. A couple of people did, but I just remember taking him aside and saying, I don't like that. Maybe the other people like that, but if I've ever done something that is not to your liking, I need you to tell me privately,
yeah,
because I'm not going to respond well to that. And that was just an open communication and it kind of
mm,
worked really well. We had a really great culture when I
yeah,
think that we were like five of us that all started at once. It was kind of a new generation that came through. We kind of were able to build and create it. We didn't realize we were doing it, I think, when you look back.
yeah,
And then, then things can get institutionalized, as you said, and things
yeah,
like that. And but I think it's just talking. It's talking about it, noticing the actions, pulling yourself up and saying, hey, that wasn't great, but also being, I do a little bit of talking on, I've moved more heavily into sales, but when I started, I was coaching a lot on high performing teams. And now I've lost it, but the book by, oh, is it behind me? That might be now I can't think of it. The five dysfunctions. That's it. The five dysfunctions of a team.
oh, Lencioni.
Patrick Lencioni.
Yeah,
And I love that because it's
yeah,
about being uncomfortable with pulling people up.
oh, absolutely.
It's
You've
a
got to have
massive
the
part of the
robust
culture, right?
conversation. Yeah,
Yeah. Yes.
yeah,
So that's
because
a
you
part
got
of the sales culture as well, I think.
well, and if you've got a sales team that is run by a sales leader who is all about the number, and let's be honest, the numbers are important because that is an indication of whether we're winning on track or whatever, right? So yeah, put that to the side. But if you've got a sales manager that all they do with every conversation, whether it be one-on-one or team, is all numbers focused and not working on the fundamental disciplines and the criteria and the activities and the behaviors, you're going to build a culture that is going to be quite reluctant to share what it is they really want to share, how they really feel. You're going to have people walking around on eggshells because unless it's allocated directly to the number and that is making progress to the number, the sales manager doesn't want to hear it. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna now shut up, or I'm now going to say things that I think the sales manager wants to hear, which is
Yes,
not
ma'am.
good for your
Yeah.
culture.
Yes, woman. Yeah. Um, on that too, I haven't spoken a lot about this, but I love the concept of it too, is that number, how important the number is, right? Because we all need KPIs and different businesses, different strategies. But how do you get to that number? I think that's a good question. Is who's picking that number? Is it Europe? Because I'll work with a lot of different companies. Is it Europe that's spitting that number out to you in Australia saying this is where you need to be? Or is it your actual team saying, hey, we're on the ground and I know what we hit last year and I know where our growth can be?
Yeah,
We had a little bit of both where I came from. We were able to really kind of knuckle down and go line by line of what we thought we were going to sell next year. That's kind of how we set our budget. It then went
yeah,
back to the board and there was a little bit of, okay, well, we need a little bit more growth, which is understandable. They're the shareholders and I completely understand that. But I think there has to be that discussion of, hey, we want growth from the board. That's where I think a small, beautiful company has that communication. It can do that really well. When you get to a global gargantuan and your board might be in Europe, there can be a real disconnect. And that's
100%.
often what I see. Sure, yours could be similar. They'll want a number, and it's just
Yeah,
not realistic here on the ground right now for whatever
that's it.
reason.
That's it. Now,
And that's really disempowering, isn't it?
well, it can be. And the role, and I say this all the time, the role of the sales manager is one of, if not the most difficult roles in corporate. Because you've got to manage the expectations of the senior leaders. You've also got to be the buffer between you and your team. You've got to actually manage all the stuff you're dealing with your team and actually be the conduit from your team to the senior management group. But you've got people who are setting targets that almost sight unseen. And a lot of these senior leaders are setting targets based on the recommendations I want to make to the marketplace, which are linked to their short-term bonuses, mid-term bonuses, long-term bonuses, and it all comes down. Right, so it's not easy. I was working with a large global organization just before Christmas, and I won't give the name, but statistically, this is how warped it was. Um, the sales rep at the individual contributor level, the statistic was I think it was 2 out of 5 were making their sales number for the year.
Yeah.
The sales leaders, it was like 3 out of 5, but the higher you went up, the senior executives, 100% of them were making their number. And what that meant was there were deals happening around the ecosystem that some of them were so big they compensated for all the people that weren't getting their numbers. So from a macro perspective, the company was great and the senior executives were making their bonuses. But from a cultural perspective, you've got individual contributors that are looking at their portfolio, looking at their target and thinking, you know what? There's absolutely, I'm a good salesperson, but there is absolutely no way realistically that I can get ever even close to that. So it becomes a demotivator.
Mm.
So we need to understand that the number is what drives the profitability, the EBITDA and all that sort of stuff. But there has to be a collaboration that comes in.
Mm.
And the
Completely agree.
clients that I've worked with who have big targets, it's about this is where it comes back to mindset. It's about the reframing, not a case of, and look, I'll say that at this point, I don't have never met any salesperson, me included, who was ever happy with their sales target they were given, right?
Yeah.
Because it's always too much, right? Because it's
Yeah.
always bigger than last year. It's never gone backwards, right? Although I had met somebody that says, "Oh, through COVID, our sales target went backwards for a year, which was fantastic."
Mm.
But the question most salespeople don't ask is they don't ask the question, "How could we do it?" They lead with this is too big, and they start from a perspective of this is unachievable. And so you start from a position of lack and fixed mindset, not growth mindset.
Yeah.
And part of our role, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is to help our sales leaders and our salespeople change their perspective that, okay, the target is the target. What do you have control over? You don't have control over the target.
No.
That's given to you. What you do have control over, though, and what you can influence is your behaviors, your
Mm.
activities, your disciplines, right? So instead of saying, I don't think that's achievable, think about how is that achievable? How could we get
Yeah.
close?
And
That's
I've
the
got a
difference.
real world example of that. Before I'd started my study, I was fortunate enough to have a coach, business coach, in my role as product development manager. And we had a sales target, and we were financial year, so we set our budgets in the May, June, and then hit the ground running in July. And one of my customers ended up shutting down. Weren't privy to this information at the time when we set our budget, and one of my, I think, was the top third of my budget shut down, closed its doors like in July, August of the
Yeah.
financial year. So I was hurting early on, and it was really disempowering for me. I was like, I'm not going to achieve it. Fortunately, I had a business coach at the time, and it was getting kind of closer to the close of the financial year, and she was never going to. I was like, I'm not going to make my budget. Like, there's no point of even, I've done everything that I can. And she was like, well, that's a terrible mindset to go into, like what can you, and it was all of those questions, right, Darren? That was so eye-opening for me. And so even though I'd lost I think it was the third or second, it was the biggest chunk of my budget really early on.
Mm,
With a couple of those questions that she was able to kind of start making me work on once they'd closed their doors, I ended up still hitting my budget I hit it in May, close to June, closing the doors. And it was just unbelievable that we were able to do that. And it was the shifting of the mindset. It was what actually can I do? Taking away, okay, I might not be able to get to that number, but what can I do here in this space?
mm,
What more conversations can I have? Who can I, what numbers do I need to look at? What are those, what products did we sell that we haven't sold? All of those kind of things. And I ended up getting there, and it was just the coolest. It was such a good testimonial for her in her business, but it was such a cool experience for me to go back on and go, it doesn't matter what happens during that financial year.
yeah.
There's always opportunities there, right?
Always. Yep.
And I think that then flourished my passion for coaching and being like, it's in the questions, right? It's in the space that you create for people
Yeah.
to help them. And that's what I love about coaching too. You're teaching people to fish. That's the analogy I kind of
Mm,
use.
mm,
So that when I go, you know how to fish and stay full,
mm.
right? It's not, I'm not fishing for you. I'm not doing it for you. It's about, hey, how can you do this differently? What skills have you got in this area? Yeah.
That's it. So talk to me about that, because one of the other things I've learnt to do through my coaching journey and certainly the workshops that I do is to encourage sales leaders in particular to certainly set big goals. Don't sort of challenge the target and say this is rubbish, we're never going to do, but embrace it, have that growth mindset, but then remove themselves from the pressure of always having to focus on the number. So almost like separate the outcome. The outcome's there, but don't spend every moment and every day focusing on the number, because you'll do your head in, plus you'll do your team's head in as well. Focus on the fundamentals. So in the work that you do with sales teams, and I'm sure that many, and you said it before, the agricultural space is often affected by things out of their direct control, such as weather, climate, all that sort of stuff, right? Um, what are some things, some specific tactics or strategies that you help them with, particularly with sales teams that are working in that space that is quite uncertain, that can help them generate that certainty, but focus on the things they do have control over?
Mm. Some of the things that we work on are a couple of things. I love that in control and out of control discussion, right? So within agriculture, as you said, it's like weather, amount of rainfall, the varieties that the farmer may decide to go with. So as someone that still sells vegetable seed, it's out of my control whether or not they choose to buy mine. I can manipulate things to a degree in terms of building rapport and trust and showcasing them, but that's kind of, the decision is out of my control.
Yeah.
And so understanding what is in my control. And I think wherever I start with my coaching and training facilitations is all about that self-awareness. And I think that's in that story when I was working with my coach. That's what
Mm,
kind of struck my passion, is kind of learning about myself, how I prefer to receive and process information. And that's been a big part of my study, and that's what I'm really passionate about sharing now. And so for me, some of the big strategies that I help teams with is firstly, behavioral profiling. I love doing it, not diving too deep into it. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on it. So I'm trained in DISC, watching a couple of YouTube videos to kind of work out where you are on the quadrant, D, I, S, and C, understanding the kind of questions that those types of personalities ask, what, who, how, and why. Then you start to listen for those questions and go, right, okay, so I love it because people will always have a laugh watching the YouTube videos because, there's resourceful ways that we can be I'm a high I, Darren, if you weren't aware, that all about the people and the energy.
Sorry, knock me over with a feather, Georgia.
And and there's always unresourceful ways. So, Ds can be really domineering. They can be very unsympathetic in terms of people's feelings. They want the result now. Is can come across as quite disorganized and flustered and can overpromise. And the S's and the C's can kind of get really stuck in the data and not overly concerned about what it's kind of getting us. And so knowing that, we all have a little joke and work out where we sit on that quadrant. Oh, okay, that's why I'm like that. And then we flip it out to their customer base, and we'll have a discussion about that going on. Yeah, shit, I've got some D's. Absolutely, I've got some D's. Got a few C's as well. Got some I's. And so when we know that, you will know this obviously is in your career, but when I know I've lost people, I've brought data to people and showcased them. Oh my God, this variety of lettuce, it's got all this disease package, and it's going to, yield incredibly, and their eyes roll in the back of their head because they don't give a shit, right? And as an I'm not a data person either. So when people come to me, it's funny, my partner Danny is all on the data, loves it.
Yeah.
And we'll often have conversations. He'll be talking and I'm not listening, and it's just hilarious. And knowing that, going, right, if I'm going to a D person, if I'm going to a customer that it's a D, I can't control the weather, right? So coming back to that question, I can't control the weather. I can't control what their type of personality is. I can't control all of these different things. But what I can control is my profiling. I can learn how they like to receive information, right? So they're D, so they're really results orientated. So when I'm bringing all my information, all I need to bring them is, hey, if you grow this lettuce, you're going to be able to have a 50% increase in yield, whatever it might be, right? If you use this fertilizer, you're going to reduce your costs, and you're going to be able to reduce your carbon output, and you're going to have an increased yield as well.
Yeah.
If you're talking to someone who's an I, they want to know who else is using it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Farmer Joe down the road, he's been using it 3 years, right? You got your testimonials there ready to go, right? You have a grower night so people can chat. Yeah. With your C's, they want the data. So you give them the spreadsheets. You go nuts. And you let them, they need time to make the decision as well. And S's need steadiness. And so they need reassurance that they're making the right decision. And so it's making sure that you're selling to that person.
Yeah.
Right. And so they're some of the tactics that I use, as well as in communication. One of the coolest things I think I've learned is becoming aware of people having 4 different styles of preferred communication. So your visual, your auditory, your kinesthetic, which is touching, feeling, and audio digital, which is data. It's not linked to personality, interestingly enough, but it can mirror it a little bit. Yeah. So your visual people are often wear bold colors, drive fancy cars that have got good brands, wear those fancy handbags and all those kind of things. Auditory people have a really good speaker in their car systems, walk around with headphones on, talk a lot, talk to themselves. Kinesthetic people wear like velvet, love the feeling of the clothes on their body, want really comfortable seats and shoes and that kind of thing. And AD people analyze that data thing. And so when we're selling to that kind of notion, I'm not going to get a visual person to sit down in a comfy chair and touch them, because they're going to be, visual people stand back. This is one of the, I love teaching this as well. Visual people stand back and so need more space between them to take everything in, and they talk really quickly. Kinesthetic people stand closer because they need to share the energy. Yeah. And they talk
Softly.
really slowly, because they're processing stuff. Things coming in, it goes down to their solar plexus. They think about how that feels and they make a decision to the reply, and then it comes back up. And so, I started doing this in teaching workshops in high schools and teaching this. We had so much fun doing these kind of workshops and building rapport and things. But noticing the judgments that come, and they start early on, like my kids at 5, it starts in the, really, really young. Someone who talks really quickly or has flashy cars versus someone who talks a lot slower and isn't concerned about like they might have mismatched clothing because they don't care about that. They just like how it feels.
Yeah.
They'll look at each other and speak at each other and go, why are you talking so fast?
Yeah.
Like, why are you're really showy in terms of you're so shallow because all you care about, they're just subtle judgments that we all do. And it's just simply a visual person gives a shit about how they look because that's how they process information. A
Yeah.
kinesthetic person cares how things feel because that's how they process information. And so all of the customers that we work with process things in those 4 ways, right? They've got a preference, work it out. Once we can work it out, it's pretty easy to once you're kind of clued onto it, sell
Yeah.
to that. Showcase
Absolutely.
images of your products if they're visual. Get someone to walk through a trial. That's the easiest way that I kind of sell it in agriculture. If you've got kinesthetic growers, they need to touch and feel the product. They're going to need to break the corn off. They're going to need to peel it. They're going to need to have it in their hands. Same with like a bag of fertilizer. Give them a free bag so that they can have it, take it home, trial it, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Whereas sometimes you can sell someone a deal over the phone.
You
Right?
can.
Everyone's different.
Yeah.
Going, yeah, okay, I've heard everything that I need to know. I can be sold over the phone, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
works for me. So knowing that, there's some of my two bigger tools that I use, particularly in like sales 101 when we're kind of bringing on newies. But I think that can even work with seasoned professionals that haven't done it in
Oh,
a while. It's the self-awareness which then mirrors out into the world, right?
yeah, it is. And the good thing about that is whether it's DISC or any
Whatever
other
it might
sort of
be. Yeah.
profiling tool, it's understanding human behavior, but being more conscious and being more aware of what you're observing and what you're seeing, what you're feeling, and then adjusting to that. So I say to people all the time, it's being like the chameleon, and the chameleon is not faking it, but the chameleon is just ever so slightly adjusting your communication style and your approach. That could be your body language, that could be your language that you use, so that you're matching a little bit more closely the communication style of your potential customer or customer. It won't necessarily guarantee a sale, but what it will do is you bring you closer together. You will build that level of rapport, which could lead to a sale or lead to some sort of call to action, which is really cool. So the one thing, and I'm conscious of time. The one other question I wanted to ask you in relation to the work you do is a lot of the sales teams that I work with, and this goes for some of the professional long-term salespeople as well. There's often a reluctance to ask for the sale. There's almost like
Mm.
this assumption that, you know what, you're going to do business with us because we've got this great product. And I'm forever trying to encourage people, hey, ask for the sale. What's been your experience, particularly in ag?
That's often the biggest one of the biggest challenges that I have with when I'm prospecting, they're not asking for the sale, they're not confident. So it's interesting because it shifts in terms of why the sale isn't being asked for. And
Mm,
for me, in terms of what I'm noticing, sometimes it's they don't have the confidence to ask. They just kind of keep halting and going back in that dance. Sometimes it's they're not hearing the buying cues. And so they're not sure that they're not ready to ask yet.
yeah.
Sometimes they can't get over that hurdle of the objection. And so they'll kind of leave it on the table. And then other times they think they've asked.
Mm,
So there's a kind of a plethora of little challenges in there that they all need to be kind of handled a little bit differently. And I always come back to, I think we've already spoken about it. It can be really scary having to go, hey, this is how much it is. And, I want you to put your money on the line for me. I need you to put, this is the transaction, let's go and let's go and do it together. But
mm,
it's shifting it from hey, I heard that you had that problem. You're struggling with your yields
yeah.
or you're not hitting your sales targets. And And so this is a solution that I think is really going to help you. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you hear about all of that, and then you go, yeah, are you ready? Let's go. Are you,
Mm,
and asking for the sale.
yeah.
So I think what I love about when that challenge comes up, I think that's a beautiful time to facilitate and have kind of breakouts and let's get what do you see? That's what I love in ag. I'll have a national sales team come together. So we'll have them from all over the country and we'll share that knowledge of going, oh, I'm struggling closing this sale here. He's this, and we've gotten all that kind of learning earlier on about personality profiling and the
Yeah.
communication style. I just don't know how to get the sale across the line. What do you guys think? And so often it's just
Mhm.
me stepping back going, cool, let's get the Tassie got, like what's happening all around the country. And people go, oh, shit, I've had someone like that before. And sometimes it's better to just cut them loose. It's
Yeah.
just different things come up, go, you know what? No, take them to the footy. What are they really into?
Mm.
And so it's about continuing to build trust and rapport, or, no, you just got to ask for it, mate. Just ring him up and go, hey,
That's it.
so it just,
Are you going to do business or not?
exactly, exactly. So I love being able to, yeah, feel the room and go, well, what do they need? And then we kind of break it down, but ask for it. Don't be nervous to ask for it because it's a privilege.
Well, it is a privilege, and it's one of my key philosophies that selling is the ultimate form of service. But my role as a salesperson is to identify a problem first and foremost and try to work out with collaboration with a prospective customer, is this a problem that they want to solve, but is it a problem they need to solve?
Yeah.
Now, if I can articulate that problem, then they will automatically attribute me as having some form of solution. Now, whether they take that solution or not, I can't force them to do that because that's push manipulation. But I've got to make them feel that if they don't take this solution, the ramifications of them not fixing the problem is going to be a lot bigger than
Yeah.
the benefit of actually fixing the problem. So
Push into the pain. Yeah.
the natural consequence is, hey, what do you want to do? And sometimes I'll just say, I'll leave it up to them. So what do you think, based on what you've seen, what is the next step? What would you like to do?
Mm.
And sometimes I say, well, tell me, okay, this is the process. Great,
Yeah.
let's go. So, but you've got to ask. You've
Yeah.
got to ask because it is a privilege, right?
Absolutely.
Because if your mindset is I'm here to provide a service, and if I really care about the outcome, because the other thing to realize is the sale doesn't start until after the sale is made. Now, there are so many people out there who are looking for the new business all the time, and they're not looking after their repeat customers necessarily. So, if you look after your people, they'll keep coming back to you. That's where
Repeat,
referrals, and you
right?
talk
Yeah.
about this yourself.
Yeah.
Referrals are coming to you. So, that's what it's about.
It is. Absolutely. And it's such an easy way to sell. Having it like new lead generation is a lot of energy, right?
Yeah,
Being able to
absolutely.
keep maintaining your current stock, your current customers that are happy
Yeah,
is a lot easier. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Georgia, love this conversation. If we're in January, middle of January, can't believe it's the middle of January.
Already.
Looking at 2025, what are you seeing? What are some things you're looking forward to? If you had your crystal ball, what does 2025 look like for, I guess, your world in terms
Yeah.
of the sales world for you?
2025 is a big year for me. Interestingly, I last year was very much business development, so I was able to run a fair few influential sales workshops in the ag space, plus some non-ag as well. And so a lot of business development for me, creating new connections, talking about what I'm doing. And at the back end of the year, interestingly, it's something that I'm learning about my industry even now. Ag doesn't stop,
Mm,
particularly in Australia over the Christmas period. It's summer, it's where a lot of people are making money, harvesting grain, horticulture, dairy, etc. There's a lot happening through the summer. We kind of will slow down to a degree through the winter, but then we'll often move things up north.
yeah,
But I did notice that I had a lot of inquiries come the back end of December where people are about to switch off for a few days to go, right, what are we doing next year? So I kind of was humming right up until the end, which was exciting. So for me, lots more travel, I think, around Australia and New Zealand, helping ag companies across those two countries. And I've got big goals. I want to, I think within the next 2027, by the end of 2028, because it's already 2025, I want to have worked with 100 ag companies. That's my
Nice.
big goal. So that means, at least 30 new ag companies this year, which is really exciting. Well on the way with those connections and things, but it's a big, bold goal. We've got a lot of challenges. We've got a lot of challenges there in our industry. A lot of tight margins getting squeezed both ends, from the consumer wanting things cheaper and from the supplier selling things more expensively. So that's a big challenge that I'm hearing along the chain. And a lot of poor communication along the chain is a big challenge for us. I think I don't think that's ag wide. Staff has always been a challenge for agriculture. It's a dirty, unfortunately, we have a rap of being a dirty, low-paying, high-hour industry, which is not always the case. So showcasing how sexy we can be, and the coolness, I think, of, I was able to travel the world. I had a company car, computer, phone, in my 20s was really, really cool. I kind of wish I had
RM stuff.
Yeah, well, I've got one pair of RMs. Otherwise, I'm like Blundstones and Hy-Vis, and
cool.
Nice. No,
Awesome.
my RMs are the city boots kind of thing. Like they don't go on farm, if that makes sense.
Well, they're not cheap.
No, they're not cheap, but they last.
They
I
do.
think that's So, no, look, exciting things for Curious Georgia. And the 2025 is a big, big year.
Brilliant. Love it. So, love this conversation. Thanks so much for jumping on. Thanks for reaching out on LinkedIn, by the way, albeit a number of months ago. And
thank you for having
publicly,
me.
my apologies for my tardiness in responding.
All good.
No excuse other than I was busy.
Yeah.
For people wanting to connect with you and learn more about what you do at Curious Georgia Coaching, where's the best place for them to connect?
Yeah, so jump either onto my website at curiousgeorgiacoaching.com or LinkedIn, Georgia Stormont, Curious Georgia Coaching. That's where you'll find me.
Brilliant. So Georgia, all the way from Essendon.
Go the Bombers.
Go the Bombers. Go the Demons. Greatly appreciate it. Thanks for coming on the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast.
Thanks, Darren. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Thank you for listening to the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast. I trust the information in this episode has been helpful in your journey towards becoming exceptional. And remember, please take the time to rate the show, subscribe to the show so other people can find it. But also, if I can help you, jump on my calendar, go to leadwithdarren.com and let's have a conversation about how I can help you along your journey to being exceptional.